If Iran changes its behavior, the restrictions would be lifted. If Iran doesn't change its behavior, the restrictions should not be lifted. If Iran wants to be treated like a normal country, let it act like a normal country.
Bibi's straight talk bringing them to their feet in Congress. So if he's right, and history shows we can't trust Iran, should we drop the negotiations and just rev up those financial sanctions? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Elizabeth McDonald, Bruce Japsen, and joining us this week, we have Austin Goolsbee, former White House chief economist and chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. Austin, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Steve, is it time to rev up the sanctions?
Oh, it's time to rev up the sanctions and put them on steroids and stop these negotiations, David, which are a dangerous joke. Iran has a 20-year history of violating agreements. It's already violated the interim agreement in which it entered these negotiations, going for illegal parts and the like. So they can't be trusted, and any deal won't be worth the paper it's written on. And Bibi is right. We got to go and do real things.
Austin, in addition to what's happening on the nuclear front, they're also becoming an evil empire. You look at how they're controlling more and more territory. A lot of people, even a lot of Arabs, a lot of fellow Muslims are concerned about what they're doing.
I'm sure they are. And we shouldn't have gotten in a big war to take out their biggest enemy and give them all the power that they currently have. I mean, the approach that Bibi's talking about, nobody thinks that they're a great country. But if you just try to take aggressive sanctions and hope that somehow that will work, it didn't work in North Korea. That was the Bush administration approach, and North Korea got a nuclear weapon despite that. And it didn't work for 50 years of embargo on Cuba. We didn't get any regime change. So I think we just need to be realistic.
By the way,
we don't want to get in a third war.
We should mention, by the way, though, Emac, that the same person that negotiated that North Korean deal, which clearly didn't work, is the person who's negotiating right now. The chief negotiator, Wendy Sherman, is now negotiating with Iran. But the question of whether sanctions will work, oil has come down tremendously. It's half of what it was a year and a half ago. Now more than ever, I would think that sanctions would work because they rely so much on oil.
Yeah, I agree. And welcome aboard, Austin. It's good to be with you. Listen, they have worked because post 9/11, George W. Bush put in, the crackdown on terrorist financing, and Iran is on that list. It ushered in a moderate, Rouhani, who replaced Ahmadinejad. Hundreds, dozens of, international companies fled Iran. The economy is in trouble. Millions of Iranians don't like the regime and what they're doing. There's food shortages. There's inflation. And we've got, Iran not being able to deal with numerous countries because it's a terrorist finance listed, blacklisted country. So,
Bruce, you don't have to go to war. Just ramp up the sanctions.
Well, I mean, one of my problems with the speech is that he didn't outline what he wanted to do. I think we should continue negotiations. And what would be so wrong with submitting to regular, rigorous inspections? Because you cannot take away their bomb-making capability that they already have.
No, but again, there's a question of trust. By the way, before we entirely, you don't want to rule out anything, Mike Ozanian. One thing the American people don't rule out, 65% of them don't rule out military action. 65%, according to new polls, say they favor taking some kind of military action. Might not be boots on the ground we're talking about, but whether it's Israel or airstrikes or whatever.
Well, what's going on here is Netanyahu is saying, look, I want America to have my back because it's too late for sanctions, David. That time has passed. Israel's going to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, and they want to make sure we have their back. That's what this is about. So what we have to do now is focus on building up our military.
All right. Well, Rich, Bibi Netanyahu, when he spoke before Congress, and by the way, we haven't heard a speech like that or a response from Congress to a foreigner speaking in front of Congress since Winston Churchill in 1952 told us about the Iron Curtain. That was an extraordinary speech, and I think even though there were some protests from the left wing of the Democratic Party, most members of Congress agreed with him, right?
Yeah, they did. And staunch Democratic supporters of Israel like Robert Menendez or Chuck Schumer,
another Democrat.
They're being put in a pickle right now. Look, Bibi Netanyahu pointed out something really useful that is lost in all this discussion about ISIS, and that is that Iran is the major exporter of terror in the world, and they're about to acquire nuclear weaponry, and this has got to be stopped. And I would like to be optimistic, but I'm kind of agreeing with Oz here that it may be too late for sanctions, because Bibi was saying we're going to take care of this problem whether you have our back or not.
Well, but Steve, there are ways to go after evil empires without going to war. I mean, the way Ronald Reagan, for example, he had sanctions, but he also supported all of the freedom-loving people that were against the Soviet Union. He supported solidarity in Poland, Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia, the Contras in Nicaragua. When in 2009, by the way, there was a protest by the Iranian people against the government after an election, and that stood in sharp contrast. We did practically nothing to help those folks.
That's right. The president betrayed that green revolution. And in terms of sanctions, if you make them tough enough, they do bite. In the case of North Korea, we removed effective sanctions in 2008 on going after banks that the country was using to finance its activities. And that's why the appeasement failed again. We took the bad sanctions off, put the tough sanctions on, and if they don't work within a few months, then we're going to have to look at other courses of action. Iran cannot get the bomb.
Austin, I know you weren't working for the State Department back then, but in 2009, I mean, we did have a great opportunity to support the freedom-loving people in Iran. We didn't do enough, did we? And shouldn't we do more of that?
Look, when Netanyahu came before the second Iraq war and said that the Middle East would be a far better place if we would simply start a war and take Saddam Hussein out, I think there wasn't enough attention paid to what are the consequences of military actions or extreme actions. When you come to 2009, the reason that nobody wants to get into an aggressive posture toward Iran is we're coming out of two virtually endless wars that cost us trillions of dollars.
Well, but Austin, we just showed that poll. 65% of Americans think some kind of military action against Iran would be worth it.
You put words in their mouth. They are not. Go ask the question. Do you think we should have another war like the Iraq war?
No. We're not talking about that.
2% support.
Emac, we are not talking about another war. We're talking about ramping up sanctions. We're talking about supporting in a very, very strong way the people that are against this new evil empire.
Yeah, and the people inside Iran don't like what the regime is doing. You're right, David. I hear what you're saying. Again, Rouhani, who's running the country, he's a moderate. He was put in place after they shoved out Ahmadinejad, who was basically considered crazy by many people inside Iran. Listen, what's going on with sanctions, though, is that Iran has been basically getting China and Russia to help it out. They've been cheating, helping Iran cheat. But watch this. Oil exports in Iran have cut by more than half since the sanctions took place.
And they're hurting. But, Bruce, the fact is these aren't just sort of neutral operators with regard to the Iranians, I'm talking to the Iranian government. They were actually, while we were negotiating with the guys, they were bombing a mock-up of a U.S. aircraft carrier. I mean, what's that about? These guys really have all but declared war against the United States.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, when you have China,
well, how would you describe? Hold on a second, Bruce. How would you describe what they just did to the U.S. aircraft carrier mock-up? What's that about?
Well, I agree that that's not what we want here. But if you if you stop negotiating, we don't want to bang the drums of war either. I mean, the country is tired of that. I mean, 65% of Americans ask the question whether they want more tartar sauce on their fillet of fish would say the same thing.
Steve,
people don't want war.
Steve. Nobody wants war, obviously, but we don't want to be attacked either, Steve.
The bottom line is Iran cannot get the bomb. And what's the best way to try to prevent that? If sanctions, we hope, but if not, then we're going to have to consider other measures. That's the bottom line. The negotiations won't work. Iran's never adhered to an agreement in the past.
In my lifetime, we have defeated an evil empire without going to war with them, so it can be done.